Welcome to CenturyLink Field in Seattle on an overcast, blustery, and at times rainy Sunday afternoon as we get set for the NFC Championship game between the 13-4 Seahawks and the 13-4 Green Bay Packers.
They're hoping we ain't hungry. They're hoping that we ain't willing to go there today. They're hoping that we ain't ready to sacrifice. They're hoping we ain't ready to do everything to win the game. You know why? We do it for each other.
Huge opportunity, man. We work for it every day. It's no different, man. Goals go 1-0. Let's dominate. Let's be focused. Let's play for each other. Let's play together. Let's play for these fans tonight, man. Let's go to work, man. Let's go. Hey, one mission. Hey, Hawks on three. Hawks on three. 1, 2, 3.
Welcome to the Seahawkers podcast with your hosts Adam Emmert and Brandon Schultz.
Welcome to the Seahawkers podcast. I'm Brandon Schultz, and joining me today, the creator of the Rain City series, William Cornell. He's got a new one out, The Rain City Miracle, and he's joining me today to talk about it. William, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I am well. I got to check out the latest installment. It's unfortunate that it takes so long for you to put these together because they're so good. And I enjoyed myself an afternoon cry at a couple different points. Just remembering back to that 2014 season and all the good points to it too. It was fun.
Yeah, that does tend to happen. You go through these and you edit them, and it's not like I don't cry either. I'm sitting here having to edit these things, with full on tears sometimes. So it's, after about 4 years of that, you're a little emotionally drained after a while.
I bet, because going through the actual process of editing, I have to imagine that it actually you're seeing it over and over and over, and that I can see how that would be difficult.
Yes, very, very much so. But you get used to it. I sometimes wonder if I've kind of let all of it go to some extent, because now I'll watch the episodes now and I just don't have the same emotional reaction to it as I used to. So I wonder if I'm just spent.
Well, the one thing that I really like about this, William, is that it's kind of like the movie Major League. You know the Indians don't win it all that year, but it ends with them overcoming the odds to beat the Yankees and win the pennant. And that's the key part of Major League. And that's what this feels like to me. Yeah,
for sure. And there's kind of a thought process into that, because we all know what happens. It's not like, this is a TV series where we don't know what's going to happen week to week, I was a big fan of Breaking Bad, and I just didn't, in the height of that series, I wasn't ever sure what was going to happen. And this isn't like that. And so you kind of have to play into the curiosity a little bit. For example, when I, would end previous episodes, I would kind of leave a cliffhanger. Mm-hmm. We all know what happens, but it just kind of adds to the excitement. So there's definitely a, strategy in place there, just to kind of keep you curious.
Well, I have to admit, I was a little bit skeptical when I heard that you were making an entire feature that focuses on a single game. How could you make a story out of one game? And I have to think that was something that you considered early on. Oh, yeah.
Really, when that game ended, me and my buddies had watched the whole thing, and we were over at 88 Keys, which is, I'm not sure if you're familiar, it's just like a couple of blocks north of the stadium. And we were just in awe of, what we had just witnessed. And I remember walking back, and this is only a couple of weeks after the last episode was made. So I didn't really know, what my next move was going to be as far as, what I was going to create. And after that game, it was just really obvious. It just had to be documented. And I had made a decision, regardless of what happens in the Super Bowl, that regardless will be one of the best games we'll ever witness. And it might be the best playoff game we've ever witnessed here. So, it had to be done. And so, it's no different than any of the others. It's just, there's one of those things that someone had to do it, and now we'll be able to relive it. So that's kind of the bottom line there.
How do you go about it? Do you go back and watch everything from the season, after the entire season's over? Do you go back and just consume everything that would go into that season and pick and choose what works best in it? Or how do you go about that?
Well, that's exactly how I do it. I kind of dig everywhere. I'll go to ESPN, NFL.com, Seahawks.com. I'll take whatever I can get. It just takes a lot of digging, and for example, once I have an idea in my head of how the video is going to start, and I'll kind of have a, general theme I'm looking for. For example, this last episode, pre-week 1, remember the preseason hype going into 14, and it was, will the Seahawks be able to repeat? There was all this hype on whether we could do it or not, and that's what you're looking for to fill that, part of the video. So I'm looking for videos that'll have, a media voice saying, can the Seahawks repeat? What do you think? And then, talking heads, giving their 2 cents on whether they can do it. So it's, it's definitely a little bit of going back and picking from, what you think works.
Well, and it's not just the video too, but the music you use, it fits really well too. How do you go about finding the right music for each particular point in the story?
Well, that's a challenge in and of itself, especially the more I make, because I'm kind of running out, and I try my best not to recycle, but it does happen. But the music is like 90% of it. I've still said to this day, it's finding the right right vibe for what you're watching, and just finding the right music to match the event. So it's that's challenging in and of itself.
I can imagine, because there's so many times where I'm trying to do a gag on the podcast, and I cycle through so many songs that it's like, oh, well, that's close, but that's not what I'm looking for.
Exactly. And then you got to deal with, cues, there's going to be percussion in some parts, and you've got to match that up with certain parts. Like if there's a big tackle, you want that to be on cue with, a big rise in the song. So it's all just one really big puzzle piece that eventually, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When it works, it's like, sometimes it really works and right away, and those are the best moments.
Using the Green Bay game and the Denver game early on in the season, the themes that you pull out of those games tied in with helping to tell the story, and along with the other games that you put in too. So similar question to before, kind of, how do you make those connections as you put it together?
I don't know. Kind of going back to the, the last question you asked about, how was I going to do the one game? I didn't know how I was going to do it until I just wanted to do it. And so this was a little bit different, where I didn't have an idea set out before I opened up the program. It was more, let's just start this and see where it goes. And we'll just, we'll go sequence to sequence and see what happens. But, I don't remember where the initial idea was to actually use that concept of the flashback theme. It just wouldn't have worked to do this episode in chronological order like all the rest, because I don't know that it would have had the same effect. There needed to be a parallel to create a good concept, really. And I don't think it would have been the same. So, I don't know. I kind of ran with it. I took a risk. I kind of went away from what I usually do, and it worked out, I think. So.
Well, and it would have been a lot shorter too, because I know anytime that I go back and watch that game, I just automatically fast forward to 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter and watch from there. So it's good watching this and getting some of the stuff that goes on in between. That's kind of exciting.
Sure. Well, there were just a lot of parallels when I sat there and thought about it. There was a lot of parallels with that game in the season. I mean, there was the good start. You had the Richard Sherman interception. Then you had the dominant win over the Packers at week 1, the Broncos game, the overtime game. It was really exciting. And then we went into a rut, and it was, the same thing happened in the NFC Championship game, and we were tested. I mean, the team was, it seemed like, in 2014, at one point that season, we were wondering if we were going to make the playoffs. And, I just kind of put those parallels together and ran with it.
Well, watching it made me kind of remember how much they tried to get the ball to Percy Harvin. You talk about those ruts, and when they traded for him, it was a big story. And then going into the 2014 season, he was finally healthy, and so just that part of the story of him being such a focal point. And I remember those questions about the identity of the team, and they really worked into this story.
That was. Regardless of what we know about Percy Harvin now, that seemed like a big negative at the time when we got rid of him. I remember everybody started freaking out, and all of a sudden all that stuff came out about, all the week going into Super Bowl between him and Golden Tate. And there was just all of a sudden it just raised a lot of questions about the state of that locker room. And so, it was kind of an interesting part. And I actually just read recently that, Richard Sherman was saying something about they had a team meeting after that whole Percy Harvin trade. Definitely an interesting part of it, for sure.
Well, it lined up so well with that Cowboys game too, because they only lost by a touchdown. It was a close loss to the Cowboys, but we kind of had that feeling at the time that our team should be invincible at home, right? And that was a really big question in the minds of fans at that time of what's going on here with this team that now they're losing at home.
Right. And it was really that series of events. It was the Cowboys loss. It was the Harvin trade and then the loss to the Rams, which were two really close games. But I think you're right. I think the bar was set so high that these were not games we should have been losing. And I mean, I think up until that point, everybody just thought that Percy Harvin was another guy on the team. I don't think anyone had the idea that he was a chemistry breaker or anything like that. So all that kind of happened at the same time. And it definitely, as they say in that video, it had a lot of people sleepless in Seattle.
And I follow this team really, really closely, and it was there was some points in it that kind of surprised me that I really didn't even remember. And one game that really stood out that I really didn't remember from that season was the game against the Raiders. What was it about that particular game that stood out for you?
That was a game where I was given a lot of footage, so I wanted to use that. But it also it had great example. And Russell Wilson, I kind of used that as a turning point in the episode where, I mean, everything leading up to it, there were questions about whether he was going to lead the team. And I don't know if you remember, there was all that stuff about whether he was black or not in the locker room. And it just seemed like that was a good opportunity in the episode to display his leadership. And there was a lot of footage I had of him on the sidelines, and you just watched it. So, he's on the sidelines, completely taking ownership of the current struggles. And it was a character win, as they say in the video. So I just thought that was a good, when he was being questioned on whether he could lead the team or not, it was a good representation of his ability to lead the team. So I thought it was good.
And when you talk about getting a lot of footage for a particular game, is that because there's a mic'd up session for a particular game? Do you have access to just the footage that any of us can go and get online, or do you have special access to certain things that maybe we can't get?
I have access to a couple places where you can find stuff from a long, long time ago. And I've even videos that are no longer currently on, NFL.com or Seahawks.com, but it's all really the same stuff when it boils down to it. I don't have any, I don't have the, I've always dreamed of someday be given access to like all of NFL Films footage and, the gold mine or whatever you want to call it. But I still don't have access to that. Maybe someday.
Now, if you do enough of these, William, you're going to have access.
I really think so. But we'll see. It's a pipe dream for now.
So you talked about how it got to be kind of emotional for you while you were making this. What were some of the emotions that you had while making this? Were there some parts of that game, and because some parts of that, some of those games, the Miracle game, and even parts of the season that are really hard to watch. Yeah,
and they've all been like that. That's what makes the turnaround so good around these episodes is you got to have those lows for the climax. I don't know. I mean, it's usually the same. It's just it's just a really inspiring feeling. It's just like, it's weird. I think with the music combined with what you're watching, it's like sad happy. It's
right.
It's weird to describe, but I know you know what I mean.
Well, especially at the end, when you're seeing Russell Wilson and you're seeing Jermaine Kearse. Talk about that. What do you think about that Russell Wilson to Jermaine Kearse connection? Particularly in light of that game.
Well, it was so emblematic of this team's unwillingness to fold. I mean, and we have never seen Russell Wilson act that way during a game, or he's just never done that before. So, and the fact that the multiple team members were trying following that game just kind of shows you the epicness of it all. I mean, it was pretty crazy. I'll never forget watching him. I hadn't left the bar yet. Eventually, we ran down to the stadium when we were watching during the game. But before we had left, they were showing him cry on the TV. It was like, whoa, this is pretty crazy, because Russell Wilson, he doesn't really like to show emotion at all. He's very by the book, even keel. So it was eye opening. But to answer your question, it's I mean, you can't write that, man. I mean, they were down 16 points at half. every interception that you've thrown was to this one guy, and then not only did you win the game, but it was to the guy that had, you'd been targeting all game and been intercepted. So it's like that. It was like a minor redemption in the greater story.
One other thing, while we're on the topic of players, this video made me miss Marshawn a lot.
Oh yeah, me too. It made me miss Ricardo Lockett too. Actually, there was a couple. I didn't actually include him a lot, but there were
moments where it stood out. Yeah, it jumped out at you.
For sure. No, yeah, but Marshawn for sure, man. I mean, not even just his play, but just his demeanor. I love that clip on the sideline. They're down by 6, or what was it? They're down by 12 points. They need to score to basically keep their season alive. And Russell Wilson's like, maybe we should run that wheel. And he goes, it's all good, man. We'll just whatever. Marshawn just being the same Marshawn he always is, no matter what. I thought that was classic.
That stood out to me. And the other Marshawn moment that stood out to me, and one of my favorite moments, and I loved how you put it together, the Marshawn Lynch Beastquake run in Arizona. And I love how you showed kind of the view from the bench, the defense, having discussions, going through business as usual on the sideline while the offense is on the field. And as soon as Marshawn puts the move on Patrick Peterson and breaks free, the whole sideline just erupts.
Yeah, no, Ken Norton's face was classic. I think he's talking to KJ Wright, and then he can't even focus. At some point, he just stops talking altogether and realizes, oh, shit.
Catfish!
This is happening.
Right.
That was crazy, yeah. And I wish I could have incorporated more from that Arizona game just to kind of touch on that game, because there were so many good plays in that game. There was the Russell Wilson crossover. I think there were 2 Richard Sherman interceptions, if I could be mistaken on that. But I wanted to include more. It just didn't work with the song I had chose for that spot. And so I ran out of real estate, for lack of a better term. So that's the one thing I do wish I could have done.
So how do you get this to, an hour and a half and not have it be like a 3-hour long movie?
There was kind of a conscious effort to condense this one, because when I came up the last one, it was 2 hours, and there were a few people on there that I saw that were like, this is way too long. me personally, I think the longer you can develop a story, the better the climax is, or the ending. If you look at a lot of film, I always use this as an example. Some of my favorite movies are The Godfather. Those are like brutally long, but they're, they build a better story. A lot of my favorite movies are longer. So that's just my belief, but I don't know. I guess it's just a flow. I want to include just the most important parts, and I don't need to all the extra fat I can kind of leave out. Like the Kansas City game, I could have included. I just didn't think it was necessary. There were a couple other wins. The Carolina win, I don't think was necessary to include. So it's just, you kind of do it as you go, and you go, should I, what was the next important part of this season, or what was the next important part of this game? And we'll just go to that. We don't need to, waste any more time than we need to.
Well, I remember back to that Kansas City game too. And I remember that being kind of the, maybe one of the lowest points in the season. You're talking about a moment where it didn't seem like we were going to the playoffs. That was a point where I think a lot of us had those questions.
Totally. It's a really brutal loss too. I remember there was a couple, really suspect no calls when we were on offense. And I remember it came down to was it 4th and 1 or 4th and inches, and Marshawn didn't get it. And it was just kind of brutal, but they never make it easy for us, do they?
No, it's not any different this season.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. This one's really, we thought last season was pretty hard. I think this one's been a little harder.
Yeah, going back to the Green Bay game, though, even to this day, when I see that 4th interception, down 19-7 with 5 minutes left in the 4th quarter, I still think that's it. It's over. And I know the outcome, and I still feel that way when I see that moment.
I know. And when I first started, when I was going through, because I had downloaded the videos pretty immediately after the game, because I knew I was going to obviously make a video for it. And I rewatched it a couple times, and same feeling, like to a T. I watched and go, okay, well, how did this happen? Because I do know that it happens, but how? Because I can't even believe this knowing knowing that it does happen. So it's, yeah, I know it's insane.
And then for them to take the lead by 3 points and to give it back, I remember thinking at that moment, especially I think we all think back to the Atlanta game still when in 2012 when they lose that game after going ahead. I think we still all have flashbacks of that, and this game was no different. It gave me that flashback again to 2012, and yet they're able to overcome and win it in overtime.
I know, it was so brutal. I know. I thought we were going to win it out right there. But like I said, it's just this team has a habit of not making it easy.
But then it doesn't set up perfectly for that redemption of Jermaine Kearse either in overtime.
Exactly, and it just wouldn't have been as fun if you'd have missed the kick or something, or if we'd had a 3-and-out, it wouldn't have been as exciting. So they, I think they do it on purpose.
You have to wonder. Yeah. Sometimes. You
do.
So, what do you get out of this besides just sharing the experience?
It's just the satisfaction in knowing that it's done. A big reason, and I won't go way too far into this, but a big reason that this whole series started was because that 2006. So I'm 27. So I was, how old was I in 2006? I don't even know. But that Super Bowl run in 2005 and 2006 was amazing. It was incredible. I was a sophomore in high school, and so I was like 16 years old. But so if you fast forward to, around 2012, 2013 in that area, I always wanted to go back just out of curiosity and rewatch those moments from 2005, 2006. And they're no longer on the internet. They're gone. I mean, you're going to have to dig, and you're going to have to know some people. You're going to have some sort of exclusive rights or something. But the point is, we can't go back and watch that stuff. And so I was just thinking, what a shame it is we can't go back and relive those moments. And so, long story short, that was a huge inspiration to start this, because I just want these to be on the internet 10 years from now. When, we want to watch that 2010 season with the Marshawn Lynch Beastquake. We want to watch that again. We can now. And that's all it, that's enough to me. You got to realize I didn't even release this on the internet. This was just for me and my brother when this first started. I had actually held on to the first episode for almost 6 months before I was convinced to just put it out there. And, the rest is kind of history from there. But yeah, man, I mean, really the satisfaction I get from all of this is just the fact that I know that we can rewatch these, decades from now.
Well, it's it's tough when you think of that entire season and you remember that we were 2014 NFC champions. So often the memory goes to what happened in the Super Bowl after that. And this is really how I want to remember the season. So thank you, William, for putting this together.
No, absolutely. I mean, that is the ultimate goal, is to be able to look back on these and watch these. And that was the original inspiration behind the entire series. And it's not always about timing. If I'd have finished this 2 years from now, it would have made no difference. It still served the same purpose at the end of the day. We can, our kids can watch this stuff. So that's really all that matters.
A huge thanks to William Cornell for coming on the show, talking about the Rain City Miracle. If you want to check out the video, if you haven't seen it already, make sure to go to vimeo.com/William Cornell. That's his Vimeo page, or you can follow him on Twitter at Rain City Series. And I'll give you a link in the show notes for this episode so you can click right on it and check it out. Should also have it up on our Facebook page as well, facebook.com/Seahawkers Podcast. And with that, I think there's only one thing left to say. Go Hawks!